The Celtics Talk podcast is presented by 24autogroup.com, 11 locations across New England.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into a very special edition of the Celtics Talk podcast, a All-Star break edition. Look, I'm not trying to rub it in, maybe a little with the great sunshine splashed on me. I can tell you this is fleeting, that I will be on a plane back to Massachusetts by the time you probably see this and to get ready for the second half of the season. But it is a rare opportunity for us to sort of downshift. We get so caught up with the post-game pods and the news of the week in the off-day edition. So I wanted to use this time to have a little fun, to sort of step back a little bit and not just look at the season, but I've always wanted to kind of hone in on some moments over the course of my time covering the Celtics that seemed to come up. And what I thought was interesting, I was looking through the calendar a couple months ago. I said, man, we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of one of my favorite Brad Stevens moments, his lone career ejection. Game up in Sacramento, February 22nd, 2014, end of his first season at the helm. I mean, you go back and look at that roster. It's quite the mix of guys. Can I interest you in Gerald Wallace and Chris Humphries, Phil Pressey, a very young Celtics team that really the only team that didn't make it to the playoffs in Brad Stevens' tenure and was still trying to find its way. Brad was finding his way as an NBA coach. What I thought was hilarious is he gone, I think, 56 games. His first 56 games, didn't even get a technical, had never been ejected at Butler. He got a couple techs down there. But then up in Sacramento in an ultra physical game against the Sacramento Kings, finally hits his tipping point. Mark Davis gives him the heave-a-ho with 35 seconds to go. So he couldn't even really, he didn't really get a chance to, earn his money. You'll hear as people reflect on this moment that, he didn't have quite the outburst that could have earned him that, whatever the fine is for getting ejected. But both him and Gerald Wallace get ejected with about 35 seconds to go. And my lasting memory is Brad saying how, as they're walking, back to the locker room together, Gerald just kind of looked at him and goes, "Welcome to the NBA." And that's the way it went. It was funny because this game, it was oddly physical. You have DeMarcus Cousins, Isaiah Thomas era Sacramento Kings on the other side. DeMarcus was in foul trouble for periods of this game, but he was also just, the Celtics could not get him to pick up his sixth foul, nor could they get the referees to tee him up for jarring. I think this is where essentially Brad had enough. There was one point in the fourth quarter I seem to remember where DeMarcus actually shoves Chris Humphries and they just kind of let it go. And I think Brad was just infuriated at that point. Gerald Wallace ends up getting the tech late in the game, I think in a sequence with, ironically, Isaiah Thomas before he comes to Boston and blossoms into a superstar. And that's when Brad said he kind of put the clipboard down, spoke his piece, and the next thing you know, he was heading to the locker room, not before politely waving to Mike Malone to make sure, just the ultimate Brad move. He could not leave the court before, at least telling Mike Malone, great game, wanted to acknowledge the other side of the coaching staff. So one of my favorite moments, and there's so many layers to this, but first I had to go to Brad. I got a chance to sit down with him a couple weeks ago and just say, what do you remember from that night? Here's my quick chat with Brad on the 10-year anniversary.
You're coming up on the 10th anniversary of your ejection.
Oh, really?
February 22nd.
It's a big moment.
Kid, what do you remember from that night?
Well, I can say it now. I should not have got ejected that game.
What? Really?
Yeah, come on. No, I all I did was I think Mark was ready for me to be gone just because I was probably whining a little bit, but Gerald Wallace gets a tech and he gets thrown out of the game with 30 seconds to go and I know what he said to Mark. And so I walked over, I put my clipboard down, and I made a small statement about how maybe Gerald shouldn't have gotten tossed and maybe one of their players could have gotten a tech earlier, and boom, I'm gone too. So Gerald and I walk off together in Sacramento. Anyways, I'm it's one of those things that in retrospect you're glad. So I'm actually glad because
imagine if you went your whole NBA career without one.
There's a picture, there's a still shot of me basically getting tossed and Mark Davis is in the background like this. So every time my son gets mad at me, he sends me that picture. I mean, to this day. So I still get it in my text message, pretty regularly. But yeah, it's I guess it's a good moment for Brady, so it was a good moment for us. So.
Does anyone else hit you with that? Does anyone else bring it back up? Any of your players?
Is there a statute of limitations on complaining about getting tossed 11 years later?
No.
Whatever.
I mean, one time, you can make the case. I mean, Eddie House on our broadcast always says, he got fined one time. He's like, I need that money back. I didn't do enough.
Well, I think Gerald fouled Isaiah. I think Isaiah was the guy with the ball for Sacramento at the time, and Isaiah probably chirped at him, which probably made me a little bit more. But that's how this all works.
What a moment.
What a moment. Man, I never thought that there were anniversaries for things like that.
So, you know what? I'm always, as a reporter, I'm always trying to figure out a different angle that people are not sledding. And
it's pretty amazing that that's been 10 years ago.
Isn't it? Well, I guess that's the other thing. We are old.
We are old.
The story about Brady texting his dad, the photo, the still shot of Mark Davis giving Brad the ejection is just legendary. Brad saying that it's been a staple every time Brady is mad at him. And it is really great. There's only one moment where Dad lost his cool enough to get tossed from a game. Even though it's funny because Brad would eventually learn how to work the refs. He was pretty good at it from the start, but in his quiet way. And so while we were out at All-Star Weekend last week, for the first couple of days, I popped up to Butler and I got a chance to talk with a lot of guys up there that had either been around for the Brad era or played for him. And it's so funny. They would sit there and go, well, I can remember him swearing twice, or there was a altercation on the court at one point during practice, and Brad just kind of looked at one of the guys, just like, yeah, you better get to the locker room. Brad had always had this cool and calm demeanor. In fact, he always tells a story about how there was a game his first year as head coach at Butler. He had a very senior group, lost his cool in a sort of big moment in a big game, and felt like it negatively impacted his team. And from that moment on, Brad said he would never again lose his temper or get too high or get too low. And certainly there were instances where you could make the argument that he did, but those moments have become sort of urban legends of sorts, and these moments that the players talk about with such fondness because they just happen so rarely. That you always think back. There's a couple of game winners, like game winner against Gonzaga. And Brad watches the ball go in, just marches to center court, shakes his hand, and with the other coach, and off he goes. And that was what always stood out, is that Brad was just so even keel. Just felt like he never even got in a position where, whether it was technical fouls or an ejection, would ever happen. There's another story about how they're in the huddle during the Gordon Hayward era, and Brad is just infuriated with his group and throws a clipboard down, and it shatters, and a piece jabs Gordon Hayward. Brad, of course, probably didn't love the optics of that and apologized immediately, but he clearly had his attention of his crew in that moment. So it's just funny to hear the stories of people are just still can't believe that he ever even got tossed from a game, but they have almost like robotic recollection of that night because it stands out so just in their minds, even though they do wish that Brad had maybe got a little bit more for his money in that instance. Ironically, while I'm at Butler, I had a chance to catch up with Micah Shrewsberry, who's now at Notre Dame. He was one of Brad's assistant coaches, eventually his lead assistant, during a couple of years here with the Celtics, and was on the bench for that game. So I asked Micah what he thought of it. Here's our chat with Micah Shrewsberry.
And some of the moves they made this year were, you were around when the Marcus Smart era. It felt like there would always be Marcus Smart in Boston, the decision to get Porzingis and then trading Rob. From afar, now that you've got the outsider view, what were you thinking watching the changes on the Celtics roster?
And I know they were really tough, right? There's guys we were there when Marcus was drafted, and what he did and his role throughout this whole era in Boston was special. But I think to see an opportunity to continue to grow this team and find the best fits for the team, that's where you see the kind of decision making where you sometimes have to take the emotion out of it. To be able to get Porzingis and now to see his fit with how close he and Jalen have become off the court, their chemistry on the court, how he fits and can stretch the floor, how he's helped Al, buy some more time and give Al some more rest. And now Al can come in for different minutes. it's really worked out and paid off. And Drew Holiday, is just a stud, man. Gosh, he is so good and has been so good for a long time. But those two guys kind of fit the culture as people as well, and I think that's really helped take them to a different level.
I do want to bring up, maybe, I don't want to say it's the most infamous moment of your time with Brad, but I was checking the calendar and I can't believe it. We're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of Brad getting ejected from the game in Sacramento. One, did you ever think Brad would get ejected from a game? And two, what just like lead me through your recollections from that night? Because I can remember I left that trip early. I was sitting in an airport waiting for a flight out. And when it happened, I was just like, oh my God, I'm missing the moment of the season.
I think it's so surprising for everybody, like us on the bench, the officials, the players playing, all of that, right? You never think that it's going to get to that moment. I think, Brad's probably, he was still in the locker room, right? Because you can't really leave. But the hotel in Sacramento was right across the parking lot. So he could have easily just got ejected and walked back and, started watching film from the next game or started finishing up the film from that game. But that is a pretty special moment. I got to be a part of some technical fouls and see some of those, but I'm glad you reminded me of that because I'd forgotten about that. But now 10 years later, that'll be a good laugh for us this summer.
Do you remember like the what led up to it? He was I quizzed him on. Of course, he has total recall of the moment. He said it was just brewing throughout the game. They weren't getting calls. Like DeMarcus Cousins was going to the line a whole bunch, and then I think Gerald Green picked up a technical, and he just said something to, I think it was Mark Davis, and it was essentially like, you could probably call it the other way, or maybe Isaiah Thomas deserves a technical over there, and then he put down the clipboard, waved to Mike Malone, and off he went.
Yeah, he didn't really earn it, right? Like it wasn't like some people earn their ejections, and I don't think he earned that one, right? Not the way you want to. If you're getting ejected, like it's got to be a viral moment. It's got to be like a court storm, like security's got to come out. Like it isn't just to drop the clipboard and wave to the coach and walk off. So that's probably the one thing is, they just took a little extra money out of the pocketbook right there.
I told him at least he did it. Can you imagine if he went his whole coaching career and never got tossed from a game at any level? Like he had to get at least one, and even if it wasn't the full Bobby Knight chair throwing moment, at least he ended up getting it. While I got you here, I do want to ask you, you worked very closely with Jason Tatum throughout your time in Boston. What's it like to see him blossom into an MVP caliber player?
It's so fun to watch and see. The other night when they played, I get to watch bits and pieces of games. Like when we're not playing and we're not traveling, whatever, I'll watch them all. But sometimes when we play, I only get to see bits and pieces. But I got to see him play. I want to say Brooklyn the other night, some of the highlights, and I saw him with the headband on. And one of the pictures I have in my office is his rookie year. And we're sitting on the bench. He and Jalen and I were watching film, and they both have headbands on. And it just took me back to that moment of it must have been a special game or something to have those guys put the headband on. He's so good, man. He's improved every year. His makeup on the court, just his game, his work ethic, who he is as a person. It's fun to see. And every time I get a chance to just shoot him a text to congratulate him on what he's doing and how he's playing and everything else. And I'm actually very, very surprised that, maybe he knows he can't get on me too bad here in year one, but yeah, I didn't hear a word from him when we lost to Duke twice this year.
That's usually the time he tries to.
That's right.
Should he be the MVP? I know you're biased, sort of. But
I know I am biased, but what he's doing on the best team, right? That says nothing but MVP right there, right? He's playing and he's playing with other really good players, and he's still putting up big time numbers on the best team in the league. that's what the MVP should be.
So you said you get to watch bits and pieces. Like, how much are you able to? Are you following it super close? Are you checking if you're not watching the games? Are you checking the box scores? What's it like to watch this from afar?
Yeah, no, I check every box score. So I have it. I got to pull up the app, and the Celtics app, I can pull it up, and whether I'm checking NBA.com, ESPN, whatever it may be, I'm checking. So I know when they're playing, because I still get the alerts on my phone. They pop up. Celtics 7:30 tonight. So I still get the alerts on my phone when the games are. So I check all the time and look. My kids are the same way. Always get something from Braden that in his dorm or his apartment. It's like somebody is logged into your League Pass account, and so, he's watching the Celtics. Like, we're all in, right? We have great memories from there, so we watch all the time. I watch, like I said, if we're not playing, we're not traveling, then I'm watching games. So I love watching them play.
All right, good stuff there from Micah. I had to quiz him. He was also there for the start of the Jason Tatum era when the team drafted Jason, and his early blossoming into a superstar level player and crawling towards that all-star status. And Mike used to work with him every day, so it's really interesting to watch Micah's opinion from afar now, having watched him the last 5 years, and really develop into that all-star talent, be in the MVP conversation. And clearly, like, Micah knows just how good Jason is and how he's tapped into just another level. Our friends over at Fanatic Sportsbook, I keep checking these odds. I keep telling you guys, like, I'm waiting. There's some movement. Is Jason going to surge up in those odds right now over at Fanatic Sportsbook? Jason is still listed at number 6 on the MVP odds. You got Nikola Jokic at -160, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at +200, Giannis at +600, Luka at +1,000, Kawhi at +2,500, and then Jason all the way down at +3,500. I just can't believe he's still lingering this low coming out of the All-Star break. You've heard some of the national narrative has started to shift. Some talking heads are starting to give him a little bit more attention, reverting back to the familiar argument of the best player on the best team. This is something I was shouting on our pods in the ramp up to All-Star. It's nice to see that sort of go into overdrive here. You get the sense that people are starting to take not only note of what Tatum is doing this year, but the fact that he's had to sacrifice in order to thrive with this year's team. You can't add a Kristaps Porzingis and a Drew Holiday and expect that you're still going to average 30 points per game. You can't have another All-NBA wing in Jaylen Brown next to you and expect, you're always going to have big nights. And so while Jason hasn't had the big scoring night that maybe others around the league have had, the record hammers home how good this team is. And sure, you want to take away a little bit from him because they have so much talent. I get the argument, but he's the head of the snake, and he's the guy that is now upped his passing, that has taken his defense to another level at times, requesting the big assignment in moments. And I just think it's time for Jason to start climbing up that list, and I think you're just going to see that second half of the year. So, Fanatic Sportsbook got him low right now. That's all I can tell you right now is that I think you're not going to see better than +3,500 at any point. I wouldn't be surprised if he's up into that +600 range in the top 3 conversation for much of the second half of the season. Well, it's the final sprint, 27 games over, I think, keep saying in 52 days, 54 days. It's going to be pretty crazy. And for the Celtics, the priority has to be not only keeping that stranglehold on the 1 seed and feeling good about yourself, maybe taking it up another level, bring this conversation full circle. When I was talking to Brad that day, he's happy with where the team is and what they've accomplished, but he knows there's another level they can go to. I think the starters can be a little bit better. I think they can just dial in a little bit more, play to the level that we saw for much of the start of the season. And then the other priority has to be health. Got to keep these guys upright. When will Joe Mazzulla's first ejection come? That might be a better question. He feels like he could have a night where he could get one. Maybe more so than Brad. That fire could come out in the wrong way, and maybe a ref could catch his wrath even as he tries to keep it even keel along the way. I go back to it. I tell the story you made me hear me say it with Brad, is that I was on the first part of that trip the year that Brad got ejected, and I forget why. Maybe I was connecting home, or I just remember being in an airport late at night. I want to say it was Vegas, and I'm connecting out, and I'm just watching the game on my phone or streaming it, And then this was 2013, so I don't know. I don't think I had League Pass. I don't know. I don't know how it. Maybe it's like Slingbox back in the day from my home cable system. And I remember just being, oh my God, he got tossed. One, I was jealous because I was like, this feels like a moment. I didn't know it would be the only time over 10 years, but certainly it's been fun to go back and revisit that and have some fun with it. Our great staff has put together a piece on this. I'm going to leave you with that, with everybody we talked to over All-Star Weekend commenting on Brad's ejection and just reliving that crazy night. Check it out and then go like, subscribe. We'll catch you with the post-game pod starting back up on Thursday night here on the Celtics Talk podcast.
Wallace bumps Thomas from behind, commits the foul. Wallace still having issues with Mark Davis.
Gerald Wallace gets a tech, and he gets thrown out of the game with 30 seconds to go.
Or they just threw. Gerald just got thrown out of the game.
It was the game, I think Boogie had 5 fouls and might have committed 10 fouls that they didn't call, and he didn't get ejected.
And so I walked over, I put my clipboard down, and I made a small statement about how maybe Gerald shouldn't have gotten tossed and maybe one of their players could have gotten a tech earlier.
And they just threw out Coach Stevens for the first time.
And boom, I'm gone too.
So Brad Stevens, for the first time in his career, is ejected along with Gerald Wallace.
I can say it now, I should not have got ejected that game.
What, really?
Yeah, come on.
I think it's so surprising for everybody.
Completely shocking to see that actually happen.
He definitely wasn't trying to get ejected. I can imagine that. I mean, I know some coaches try to get thrown out at certain games. Like, he's not like that. I think he might have said the F word 3 times in 2 years.
The worst thing about all that is he never said the magic word.
Oh, gosh, not even close.
It wasn't even close.
Not even close.
He didn't really earn it, right? If you're getting ejected, like, it's got to be a viral moment. Like, it isn't just to, like, drop the clipboard, wave to the coach, and walk off.
You know, it's one of those things that in retrospect you're glad.
I was proud of him, frankly. Like, it was about time.
There's a still shot of me basically getting tossed and Mark Davis is in the background like this. So every time my son gets mad at me, he sends me that picture. I mean, to this day.
In terms of milestones, Brad Stevens, for the first time in his professional career, is running. I got to get an explanation of that at some point.